But there is price for everything, including for capturing fortresses. The rush resulted in many distortions. First of all, this fast industrialization and the use of the enormous amounts of money produced inflation. Economic indicators were not tracked. In 1930, Ordzhonikidze, the new boss of Soviet industry, reported that even such big construction sites as Magnitogorsk and Kuznetsk metallurgical factories and the Nizhny Novgorod automobile plant were built without finalized blueprints. Accounting was muddled. Money was spent without budget. In some cases, nobody could say how much this or that project cost. In 1932, Stalin announced that the first 5-year plan was fulfilled ahead of schedule. But he gave no figures because the plan was not fulfilled and it could not be fulfilled. Stalin himself, later in 1947, said that this plan was never fulfilled. And here are the figures. The production of cast iron, 6 million tons were produced, but the plan was 17 million. Automobiles, 23,000 were produced, but the plan was 200,000. The problem was not only the numbers. There was a lot of wasteful expenditure. Equipment was often broken because the workers did not have any experience of managing it. There were a lot of unfinished projects because there were no proper plans. The products produced were often of such poor quality that they could not be used. Unfortunately, such problems became entrenched in Soviet economy. And all these problems were blamed on saboteurs and wreckers. Then, of course, what was wasted was not only money. Perhaps the most important resources that were wasted were human resources. Socialist construction sites did not have modern construction machinery. As I said, many of these socialist industries were built by prison labor, but the condition of work and life of this prison labor was dreadful. This is prisoners who worked on the Belomor Canal construction site. In less than 2 years, 12,000 people died here. And of course, the Great Famine, which I mentioned earlier, that was also the cost of industrialization. Judging by his actions, Stalin understood that such pace of socialist reconstruction was a dead end. Kolkhozes produced less meat and grain than peasants before the collectivization. There was nothing more to expropriate. The punitive system did not manage to accommodate all prisoners. There were no resources to continue industrialization at the same pace. And abroad, the Nazis came to power in Germany. So Stalin had to present a better face of the country to the external world. So the pace of industrialization slowed down. The second 5-year plan, 1933-1937, the targets were reduced. Stalin introduced financial incentives for workers. In 1934, rationing was abolished. He also announced that cash economy, which was supposed to disappear during the first 5-year plan, that it would remain and develop. Barter, which was the core of the first 5-year plan, barter between factories, between kolkhozes and population, that was denounced as leftist deviation. So in January 1933, Stalin promised that a food tax would be substituted for requisitioning. In 1933, February 1933, peasants were told that they could have small private plots adjacent to their houses. He even said that the state would provide a cow to every household. Well, this did not exactly happen, but in 1937, peasants' private plots produced 38% of vegetables nationally and 68% of meat and dairy products. There was something else that the state now popularized, and this was prosperous life. What did it mean? It meant more money, middle-class values, better accommodation, longer leave, better clothing. These posters, for example, look at them. The top poster, life is more joyous every day. Look at this woman. She is obviously a hero of socialist labor because she has an order on her blouse, but next to her is a car, a private car. And the picture below, who gets the benefit from the national income? In the USSR, the workers. But look at that worker. Look at his coat. Look at the goods that he bought. This is something that was not in the Soviet posters before. Stalin rebranded even the OGPU. It was now called People's Commissariat for Home Affairs, NKVD. This is more prosperous life. Look at that woman. She is well-dressed, and now she is eating crabs. So this is actually an advert for crabs. There were no such posters just a few years earlier. Nobody advertised food. And on the right, the picture shows Soviet citizens enjoying a restaurant outside, nice weather, and they are happy. Also, what was propagated was cultured lifestyle. What is cultured lifestyle? Obviously, the young people playing tennis, or at least carrying tennis rackets. And sports. This is a demonstration of women sportsmen. Look at them, they are all happy, well-dressed. And the lower poster is go to the baths after work, which is, of course, something totally new and completely different. This is not what was propagated earlier. In 1936, a new constitution was adopted by the Soviet Union. Stalin himself proposed a secret ballot and voting rights for previously disfranchised alien elements, as they were called. These were actually more democratic or liberal principles, if you want, than revolutionary principles. The Constitution was greeted all over the world as a very progressive document. Stalin's proposals were all incorporated. Stalin did not conceal the fact that one of the purposes of the Constitution was to improve the image of the socialist motherland abroad. There was a kind of general liberalization at that time. What that meant was that even some of the people who had been arrested were allowed to go free. The Constitution proclaimed that Soviet Russia was a socialist country of workers and peasants. Did that mean that there was full equality between workers and peasants? This is a very famous statue, a symbol of Soviet people, the worker and kolkhoznica, a collective farm female worker. It was made by a famous Soviet sculptor, Vera Mukhina, and it is really a very good statue. But equality remained only on paper, because peasants certainly did not have the same right as workers. This is a Soviet passport. In 1933, the whole population of the USSR received their passports, internal passports. This is like an identity card. But not the alien elements and not the peasants. The alien elements were actually moved to faraway areas, and the peasants could not leave their collective farms because without a passport you could not go anywhere. Sometimes when the managers of the collective farms needed them to go somewhere, they got temporary passports or temporary passes, but they were not free to move. The constitution was the high point and the tail end of Stalin's liberalization. Exactly at the time when it was adopted, a new round of repression, the greatest of all, was being prepared.